A Swift Kick in the Ass, episode 163. Life is challenging and difficult. No one gets out alive. Time to suck it up, Buttercup. Get ready for a monster-sized boot, aimed to help you get traction on personal change and get living. I am John Curran, your host. Join me as I share my journey, exploring the forces that motivate us to change and help us get through whatever life throws at us. A swift kick in the ass. Life on your terms. Welcome to another episode of A Swift Kick in the Ass. This is your host, John Curran. Here with me in the podcast studio, my AI podcast studio, is Mindy Kaufman-Opiela. Opiela. I'm so sorry. Goodness gracious. Okay. Well, we don't edit this, so people know that I'm human and I'm going to botch your name, so I apologize.
That's totally okay. It's a mouthful.
So why did I bring Mindy on to the show today? Let me just give a little background about her. So Mindy was born in Cleveland, Ohio, but she moved to South Florida, and that's where she grew up, and that's where I met Mindy. Now, we've all, grown up, had our own lives, and switching around the screen here and losing my place. But I think we went to high school together, knew each other in high school, and, each went off and lived our own lives. But here we are kind of crossing paths again. And the way we crossed paths was I saw, we connected through Facebook, and I saw that you were posting a lot of the same things that I was. I could see that we were on the same wavelength, and I just loved it. And then I found out more about you and more about what your life has been since high school. And this show is really about. It's called A Swift Kick in the Ass, and it's really about creating positive change in your life. Now, if there's anyone who has created positive change in their life, it's you, and you did it the real way. And I think that the listeners are just going to love this because you truly live on your terms.
Yes.
You define how you want to live. You are a health coach. You are an author as well. As I said, we met through, we connected through Facebook. So you're on Facebook, Instagram, you're out there.
Yes.
But it's been a long time.
It has.
So, we can pick up, I don't know, wherever you think is right. So you didn't graduate from the same high school I did. You actually took off.
Yeah, I didn't even graduate high school.
Okay.
I quit high school right in my first week of 11th grade, actually. And it was really at that point for me just a culmination of being miserable in school and really just feeling like I had to get out. And it was kind of a caged feeling that had been really building up for me for quite a few years, starting as early as sixth grade.
Really?
And I know that you had mentioned the same thing about how sixth grade is a very defining moment for a lot of us who grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was kind of a survival mode mentality back then.
You had to be really tough.
Yeah, you did, and it was either fight or flight, and there really wasn't an option to there's all these programs in place now for, anti-bullying campaigns and things like that. But I mean, none of that existed back in our day. And I was kind of left struggling right out of the gate in sixth grade. When I had tried to seek the help of a parent or an adult, it was kind of poo-pooed away because they really didn't think that, 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds could be that violent and that vicious. And there was, I went to Olson Middle School, so there was a lot of racial tension too back then. And
the bathrooms,
yeah.
you avoided the bathrooms because they were covered in blood.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to leave school more than once because of being a fight being instigated and then just deciding I wasn't going to back down. And I did have a couple of friends that really did have my back in middle school. And so those were the people I gravitated to. And those were the people that I had my loyalty to because they were the ones that I felt that had my best interest at heart, where I didn't feel like any of the adults in my life, or the parents or anybody else really did. And the funny thing for me was I quit school mostly out of just sheer boredom. I had been in advanced classes since elementary school, and so that had never really been an issue for me. But I was bored, and I specifically remember going to South Broward in my 10th grade year there, which would have been 1984. They decided to add another period on, and it was this situation where I was already skipping school a lot, and I was going in and basically passing my tests with decent grades. But I ended up failing because of my my lack of showing up, where people that were in my class and failing miserably passed simply because they were there. And that was kind of an epiphany moment for me, going, yeah, this isn't about education. This is just about keeping us here and keeping us jailed and keeping us down, and so my rebellious
I still feel that way.
Yeah, my rebellious little self just, I just couldn't take it anymore, really. And I had already been getting into quite a bit of trouble. I had started running away from school and running away from home. And in ninth grade, my parents sent me to Nova in hopes of getting me away from the South Broward crowd and the people that I had kind of gravitated towards in middle school. And that was actually even worse because I found people that were more like-minded than I, and they were the same way. So I ran away with one girl, and we were gone for 3 days before the police picked us up and brought us back home. And it was just one of those periods of my life where it was just like I couldn't find enough trouble to get into. The more trouble I could find to get into, the better, because it was a rush for me. Now, what I didn't know at the time was I have since been diagnosed with long-term depressive disorder, which I didn't know I had back then. And so my acting out was really a way of self-medicating, whether it was through drugs or cigarettes or alcohol or running away. All of those behaviors were manifested because of my need to find what it was that was missing and what I couldn't find in my everyday, boring, monotonous life. So when that became clearer to me later on, much later on, it made sense, and it kind of put some things in place for me. And so it made it kind of easier to forgive myself for a lot of the things that I did, and to ask forgiveness from people that I may have hurt along the way, just with complete disregard to anyone else's feelings at the time. But from there, it took a long time to get to that period because from there, things just got worse. So for me, it went from...
Yeah, we were just in the middle school years.
I know. I was going to say, that was the middle school years. And then, of course, by the time by the time I was 15 at the end of 10th grade, I had already run away the summer before and was staying with a boyfriend. And then I ran away again in the following summer and was staying with another boyfriend who was a lifeguard actually in Dania and much older than I was. And I had told my parents that if they left me alone, I would go back to school. And I tried. I went back for the first week of my junior year, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And I said, that's it for me. And I didn't go back. And that was kind of the defining moment where I really just separated myself from any parental, anybody kind of making me do this or making me do that. And I kind of just separated myself from all of that.
Authority.
And it got real ugly at that point because the guy that I had been dating was really kind of very dysfunctional. And it was the strangest thing because, we had some arguments and things, but we were just watching a movie one night, and I will never forget this. He just got up, flipped out, went into the bedroom, and walked outside, and that was it. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know what just happened, but from that point on, about 20 minutes later, my parents showed up. He had called them and told them to come get their... We won't use the expletive he used, pick me up. And 5 minutes after my parents were there, the police showed up. And they told me that they found out from the neighbors who had called that he was actually running around the neighborhood in Dania with a gun and like pointing it at people and threatening people.
Oh my gosh.
So this was completely it's like 11 o'clock at night and I'm thinking, all right, I'm getting ready to go to bed. And now like my parents are here. The police are here. They gave me like 5 minutes to get my stuff and leave.
And this is during the 80s.
This would have been like 84. Wow, yeah. This would have been like
so much different time, much different time back then too.
Yeah, it was. And
Florida was crazy, though, during the 80s.
Florida always has been crazy. Yeah. But the 80s, I think, brought a lot of it out of people.
My parents' next-door neighbors, this was, I think, the first year I went away to college. Like, my parents' neighbors sold their house to some Colombians who paid for the house with a suitcase full of cash. They paid for it in cash.
Wow.
And then they proceeded it was on 3 different lots, big house to begin with. I don't know how many bedrooms. I think it was 5 bedrooms. But they put a second story up on the top. They walled it off. They, put, I don't know, it was crazy. They just like built this big mansion in Hollywood, totally out of character for the neighborhood. Yeah. One night, the police come knocking on my door, or knocking on my mom's door, and they say, just stay down. We're busting next door.
Wow.
They were manufacturing cocaine up in the second floor. Did not have. They had hidden entrances and hidden passageways they couldn't find upstairs. But that's where, like, all the lab was and everything. Mm-hmm. Ferraris were coming in all times of the night at this house. Wow. Souped up IROC-Zs. And
right.
This lady was, I believe she was the godmother of Escobar's network. Okay. So that's how crazy. So that was about, that was in the late 80s. Uh-huh. So that was right around that time that you're talking about. So to get back to more about what you were talking about.
Yeah, that was also the problem. I think was the '80s was definitely the influx of cocaine down here, and that's when I actually started trying cocaine. It was right around 9th or 10th grade because it was just so randomly available, and everybody got their hands on it.
Yep, pure stuff that was coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a Florida thing. It was huge, but no one really knew what the dangers of it were back then. And the 80s was very, we're coming off the 70s. Mm-hmm. So, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And cocaine was definitely, I guess, part of the rock and roll scene. Well. And, South Florida, I don't live in South Florida anymore, but the part I do miss is, the ocean and the music.
Yeah.
It attracts a lot of really good music down there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The artists that are down here are really very talented, and there's such a variety of different styles of music down here, which is so cool because, there's genres that appeal to so many different generations and demographics down here that it's really hard to find such a melting pot of music in other places, even if you go to Nashville or California or, other places. But it's always been a great live music scene. Back in the day, we used to hang out at the Button South and Art Stock's Playpen for Heavy Metal Monday and Dina's Treehouse, the Treehouse, which is the two places in Hallandale everyone hung out at because Hallandale had a 6 a.m. liquor license. So you could stay there until 6 o'clock in the morning, and most of the time we did. A lot of us closed the place, and it was really a very decadent generation, decadent era. There was a lot of excess. I think with the 70s, you tended to have more experimentation with things like hallucinogenics and LSD and dropping acid. And then you got into that was like the 60s and early 70s. And then as you started to get into the 80s, there was more of this. If I had to chalk it up in one word, I would just say speed. Like everything was fast cars, drugs that kept you like up and pumped, and the
heavy
music
metal.
was heavy metal. Exactly. The music was just, everything was about go. And so, it was really easy for me to maintain myself in the 80s because of that ability to access the cocaine and the drug that kept you going and kept you out and doing things. And for me personally, after I had quit high school, there were only two options, get a job or, move back in with my parents. And moving back in with my parents was not an option for me. So I ended up getting, I worked actually at the Sears Mall in the shoe department in Hollywood for a couple years and lived with my girlfriend, Dawn's family out in Miramar, and spent a year and a half, 2 years living with them and just back and forth making my day-to-day travels on the bus to work. And but it's funny because the ex-boyfriend, the lifeguard, would for about that whole year would stalk me, would show up at work and would show up at the nightclub and then call my parents and tell them to get their effing underage daughter out of the clubs and, all of this wonderful stuff. So my dad finally intervened. He was coming by to pick me up to talk to me one night after work and saw this guy walking up at the same time. And I never really did get the actual dialogue between them. But knowing my father, it was probably something along the lines of, if you come anywhere near my daughter, I'm going to kill you. So that happened to be the last I saw of him after that
whatever he said worked.
Exactly. It definitely did work. And I had a very close relationship with my father. I mean, my dad had 3 daughters, 2 of which, my 2 half sisters, were much older than I was when I was born, because he had previously been married for 19 years, and then ended up meeting my mom, and so I had half sisters that really were old enough to be my mother at that point.
Wow.
And but they lived all the way in California, and I think I was probably the most like my dad. I was very much a tomboy, and I was very very much about, just kind of fighting and being tough, and I really didn't focus much on the girly stuff. I wasn't into the cheerleading. I wasn't into the dresses, and which was so funny because the only person that seemed to be bothered by my early development was my mom. And she made it very much a point to use that against me at any opportunity that she could. And so that kind of, I think, became a major issue of contention between the two of us, because I was oblivious to a lot of it, and I was oblivious to some of the comments and some of the staring and things. But she always managed to find a way to embarrass me somehow by making some if I was walking through the mall and some guy looked at me, my mom would, just turn around and have to be like, "Did you get a good look? And, you want to take a picture?" And it's like, "Okay, Mom,
oh my goodness.
Settle down. Yeah,
wow.
Settle down, Mom. It's okay. Nobody's looking at me, and nobody's so." But from there, I just kind of got bored again, and decided that working at a shoe store really wasn't my end all and be all. And
this was in Hollywood, right?
This was in Hollywood. This was
Hollywood,
actually not too far before the whole Adam Walsh thing had happened.
Okay.
Because I remember that happening not too long after I left, and that was something down here that just shook everybody.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That was like the first time you heard of anything happening like that in Hollywood.
That was crazy.
Hollywood was a sleepy little town, and it was a great family place. We always joke around with these memes where we talk about playing outside until the street lights came on, but we really did that.
Oh, absolutely. I get you. I was pretty bored with South Florida too, and I ended up, after high school, just moving north, in slow increments. I went to Gainesville for college, and I spent 15 years in Atlanta. That's where I met my wife, and now I've actually lived longer than that in Virginia. So I'm as far north in the south as you can get.
Right.
They still serve sweet tea. So.
Yep.
So,
but the funny thing is, if you think about it, you actually have to go kind of north of almost like Lake Okeechobee, Ocala, to get that southernness in Florida.
True.
Because South Florida is full of the New Yorkers and a
it's
lot
southern
of
New York,
Hispanic influences.
Canada.
So, right. So the sweet tea thing, I never really grew up with that down here, because I don't think Florida, South Florida, is as southern as people think it is.
I think I probably got that from Gainesville.
Yes, a lot of my friends from Gainesville and the Tallahassee area are huge sweet tea fans, and I think that they get that from the northern part of the state.
But the ocean, though, is definitely a place where I feel at home.
Yeah.
And I miss it dearly because I'm far away from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's hard. I don't think I could do that. I did it for a very brief time, but ended up back down here simply because I think that is such a strong pull for me. The beach and the ocean, and it's definitely hard if you've never lived away from it.
I'm about an hour and a half away from the ocean, but I just I've been working on restoring my dad's 20-foot boat, so I've been taken that out, and
nice.
Now I've taken out twice now, and I'm getting all the kinks worked out.
Nice.
So the plan is to take it to Chesapeake Bay and go fishing, and
there you go.
Do that. But also, I kind of have a dream, and this is really crazy. I'm going to trailer it down to Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
I'm going to take it over to Bimini.
Okay.
Because my dad used to do that when I was growing up with,
Yeah.
with this boat. So kind of want to do that. So
I think you should.
I
And
want to
I
get a
mean, something like
flotilla
that is
together.
easy to do.
I want to get a flotilla together. I'm not going
There
to be
you,
stupid, I'm not
right.
going to
Don't
go
do it
by
yourself.
myself.
Right.
Not going to go by myself, but in a
Right.
20-foot boat. But so I'm just, kind of putting the word out there.
There you go. That's definitely a great bucket list idea right there. And
So
I mean, it's definitely doable too. I mean, I have friends that still do that now, and for them, it's like a hop, skip, and a jump.
yeah,
So,
you know, life is really an adventure, I think. And
of course.
I like you. I get bored, and I have a corporate job.
Okay.
So this podcast is kind of my creative outlet because otherwise I would go nuts.
Yes.
I can do the routine, and I have 3 kids and a wife, and I'm paying for college, and I've got this boating habit. So so I mean life is good.
Yeah.
And I try to live on my terms as best as I can, and it is a constant struggle because there's always something that you want or need or some challenge that you have to face. I think that's where we fool ourselves a lot, is thinking the challenges, they just never end.
Right.
But
Well, absolutely. I mean, life is, if there's one thing about life you can count on, is that it's always unpredictable. And sometimes that's a great thing, and sometimes it's not so great. But the consistency of being inconsistent is kind of the thing I like most about life.
yeah, I think so too. So as I'm sitting here, I took my glasses off, and I'm kind of picturing you with, with my cloudy vision, and I'm thinking back about middle school, and I mean, I kind of envision, I can see, the girl that I knew in middle school, and I'm thinking, you really know yourself, and you you knew yourself at a very young age. I think, like you said, at sixth grade, that's when it really kind of kicked in. You said for you,
Yeah, I think that's when reality had really kicked in. Because I think it's the time, at least in our generation. I don't know so much now. I mean, my son's 22, and I know that he didn't have anywhere near the same sort of experiences that we did. But I think a lot of it is because up until that point, you're almost living this somewhat sheltered life. And for me, growing up in a neighborhood that was predominantly white and predominantly either, you were Catholic and you went to Nativity, or you were Jewish and you went to, Temple Beth Shalom or something like that. But it was still, there was a lot of everybody was kind of in this same financial middle class situation. And then all of a sudden you're bussed into a neighborhood that is like, as long as you're in school, it's okay. But if I remember when we used to drive through there to get, weed and stuff, the cops were always there. And if you were white and you were in that neighborhood, they made sure you left quickly because you didn't belong there, and they knew what you were there for. So I think that it was almost like a real fast introduction to how life can be very unfair, and there isn't always going to be somebody there to protect you. And you do have to kind of own up to it and take responsibility for how you are going to let people treat you. At least that's how I saw it. I mean, for me, it was more, at that age, everybody's just trying to figure out who they are, and everybody's just trying to figure out where they fit. And I didn't, the funny thing is I run into people from high school all the time, and I still hang out with a handful of people that I've known for 40 years, and the consensus everybody says to me is, wow, you were just like that person that just, you had your act together and you knew, and I'm thinking, wow, you people have no clue. Because I was just as clueless as everybody else. Maybe I just put on a better game face about
you did.
it. But for me, it was just more, I don't think I cared. I really didn't care what people thought about me or what I did. And to me, the stuff that I did that ended up being shocking or more like people just didn't expect it, people didn't really know how to read me because, I mean, first of all, I seemed to be this, in sixth grade, I was labeled as like a goody-goody. And then by seventh grade, I was hanging out at the back gate smoking cigarettes. And I didn't really have a clique or a group that I hung out with or that I fit into. I usually hung out mostly with a lot of people on a one-on-one. So I would say I had a handful of people through middle school and through the couple years that I was in high school that I gravitated towards and I hung out with. But it was never really something I looked to develop or I looked to define. It just was,
Yeah.
And so I think that as we grow older, one of the beautiful things about aging and getting older is you do come into yourself and you do learn who you are and you do learn to accept the things you don't like about yourself and embrace the things that you do. And when you do that, I think that it shows outwardly a certain level of confidence. And, when people start gravitating to you and asking you, well, how did you do this? And how is it that you're smiling, but then you realize that whatever example you're setting must be the right one because, people are seeing you and coming to you to get your advice about things, which is actually why I went into the life coaching because I did have so many people that just went like, with everything that you've been through, how is it that you still have such a positive, upbeat outlook? And a lot of that was part of just the story of how I came to where I am now, and what I had gone through from that period of 15 and leaving up until, oh my gosh, my late 30s, pretty much for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of stuff in between there that was very dark and very difficult. When I was writing my book, it was very difficult to write it and relive it because some of it you just kind of want to go, oh yeah, I forgot I did that or I forgot about this.
But facing it though is very therapeutic, I think.
It is. It's very, very therapeutic, and fortunately for me, there are very, very few things about my life that I regret. Really, if anything, and simply because it's not that I've everything I've done I'm so proud of, but it's just that I've always looked at it as that everything I've done, good or bad, I've either learned from it. I've either developed from it. It's either been something that's been ingrained and teaches me how or what not to do when it comes to other people and their feelings. I think it's made me more empathic or empathetic when it comes to understanding where people can be mentally. And so, you can't really put yourself in somebody's shoes until you've experienced a lot of these things.
Yeah, that's very, very, very true. No, that's awesome. So you have a book out, and definitely encourage people to read it.
I do. It's called Life After the Party, and it is available on Amazon. And this is basically the whole story, the dirt on the stuff that you don't want anyone to know about, and it wasn't something I intended to write, which was really the funniest part of it is how this book came about, because I had a lot of things happen when I left at 15, and when I decided at 17 that a friend of mine was supposed to be going to California, and I was like, oh, that sounds like fun. And we had to take a pit stop in Dallas, Texas. And long story short was she wasn't very honest with me about why we were going. And she had told us we had people lined up to stay with that we didn't. She had, assumed we were going to be staying with them when we really weren't. And she ended up basically saying, well, I'm leaving. So, I had already paid for her ticket to go out there because she was supposed to be working one of the fashion weeks out there, and she was going to pay me back. And she said, I'll pay, I'm not bothering. I'm going. And so I was pretty much had no money. I had, a suitcase full of stuff, and I didn't know what to do. And I called a friend of mine when we first got there because we needed a place to stay because her friends completely were like out of the country. And my friend from down here hooked me up with somebody that he knew, which the funny thing is he knew these people because back in the day, he used to transport drugs back and forth between Florida and Texas. And so this was one of the people that he had known, and they were all in the adult nightclub industry. And we ended up staying at one of the DJ's houses that we were introduced to. And the guy was he was so nice, and he took us around. And I mean, at that point, I was always very comfortable with my body. I was never, people used to tell me, oh, well, you consider yourself an exhibitionist. But okay, fine. So, I mean, I would sneak into like the Button South and the candy store and all of those clubs and do the bikini contest when I was like 16. And so one of the things that I had noticed was we had gone into one of the clubs, and I was watching the girls that were dancing and the kind of money that they were making. My jaw was on the floor. And so the friend of mine said, well, if you want, I can get you a job working the door. I was only 17, so I couldn't bartend, but I was like, yeah, I want to try that. And he was like, okay, you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. So we went out that night, and he introduced me to a lot of the dancers and things like that. And the next night I gave it a shot, and I ended up there for 3 years. And wow. It was a lot of partying, back then in Dallas, every year you had the Monsters of Rock tour. You had tons and tons and tons of festivals and concerts that came through with like 5, 6 major bands that were headlining. And, of course, they always came around to all the clubs and gave the girls all passes to come hang out. And so we, it was a rock and roll lifestyle. I mean, I was hanging out, in LA with a guy I was dating, and we were hanging out at the Whiskey with Tommy Lee and Heather and Vince Neil and Jolyn Turner and Phil Suzanne from Ozzy. And I'm sitting there holding court at the Whiskey and the Rainbow and going, this is really cool. Yeah. But again, the problem that comes with that is when you're making that kind of money and having everything given to you for free, as far as, drugs and alcohol and clothes and things like that, it's really easy to get sucked into that lifestyle. And that was what happened to me, hook, line, and sinker, was I was, up for 2, 3, 4 days at a time doing coke. I remember one year where my first year there, because when you're 17 in Texas, you're emancipated. So my parents couldn't bring me back at that point, and they didn't really have a say in it. But I remember my first year there when I turned 18, and one of the managers of our nightclub had a party at his house for me, and basically came out with like this 2x4, mirror with like my name written in cocaine and like block letters. It was like, happy birthday. So, that was just, birthdays were great. The girls would come up and just, pack you out with money. And I mean, it is a very, it's a very, crazy sort of lifestyle, and you find yourself like on this bullet train heading right off a cliff. And that's what happened to me. Was I had an epiphany moment after being up for 4 days straight, and really just, I was suicidal at that point. And I just happened to look down at the table and didn't notice, but I noticed it at that point that there was a handgun on the table. And it was the closest I really ever came to thinking how easy it would be to just pick that thing up and just pull the trigger. And that's when I said, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to die. I'll die here because, I'm sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And the problem is I'm thinking there's only one place I know to go, and that was back to Florida. And so it was kind of like, am I taking a step backwards or, but I knew it was the only place that I would really clean up and I would really get my act together. And so I did. And I was 20. I hadn't even turned 21 yet. And I came back to Florida and tried to get the retail job and the straight 9-to-5 type stuff. And I couldn't do it. So I said, well, I'm done with the dancing, so what's next? So I decided to get my bartending certification. And I got certified as a bartender and basically spent the next 20-something years working at everything from neighborhood bars to high-volume bars to places down in South Beach, the nightclub scene there. And it was great because the money was always incredible. And the hours were easy. And most of the time I'd spend my day, at the beach and work 3-4 nights a week.
Meet interesting people.
Yeah. You meet interesting people. I did get at that point completely out of the drug scene. I've always been one of those people that when I'm done with something, I'm just done with it. Like I quit smoking because I got a new car and didn't want to smoke in it. And that was the end of it. I quit drugs because I knew how I felt. And so fortunately, I've never had an addictive personality. So I didn't need to do rehab. Rehab is great. And I don't knock it at all in any way. But for me, it was just, I knew I had to clean up. And I think that with people that go to rehab, it has to be their decision. Because if somebody's forcing you into a situation that I was in denial for a long time about my cocaine problem. I really was. I remember a boyfriend coming into the house one night and I had a straw in one hand and a line on the dresser and he was asking me why I was doing another line, and I told him, I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not doing anything. And he must have thought it was absolutely insane because I'm in total denial as I'm standing there with everything right in front of me. But I think that's one of the most important lessons I've learned, because I think it applies to everything, not just addictions, but dysfunctional relationships, abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse. You cannot force somebody to love you. You can't force somebody into a behavior pattern that they don't want themselves, even if they're only doing it for you, because eventually they're going to go back to the way that they are. People have to want to better themselves. It's got to come from within. It's got to come from within. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons I've learned from that particular situation, was that you can't make an addict quit until they're ready to quit. And you can't turn somebody's emotions a certain way if they're not there, so that was a big learning experience, but also a big help too.
Yeah, no, that's great. That sounds like great advice, just honestly, for anyone who's listening, from someone who's been there and seen that and lived it. I'm so glad that you are in a place now to where you're helping others. Absolutely. Too, and can help them find their way. Because I totally agree with you that, any decision just about a person's life, it needs to be theirs, and they need to take the first step.
Absolutely. And, it's one of the things I've never accepted is excuses. When it comes to that, it's like, I'm kind of a tough love girl when it comes to, take ownership. You're an adult, and right from wrong, and it's up to you to make this change. And even, I mean, I've even had clients that I've worked with for a while that continually go back to the same situation. And I've finally just kind of had these come to God moments where I'm like, okay, so what are you looking for me to do? Because if you're looking for me to give you approval or to make you feel like what you're doing is right, that's not what I'm here for. What I'm here to do is help guide you through what you need to get away from a negative situation, not rationalize it, not make excuses for it, not say, oh, but. So I'm very much about people owning like their situation.
Yeah.
You got a problem, great. We all have problems, but you can either feel sorry for yourself and blame everybody else, or, you can do something about it. And one of the things that's very, very important to me is something called breaking generational curses, whether it's alcoholism or physical abuse or anything along those lines. The excuse of, well, that's what my family's like, or this is how I was born. And it's like, that to me is just another excuse.
Yeah. Put a little twist on that. Mm-hmm. The way I think about it is things are not a problem unless you define them or see them as a problem. So some people might not see certain things about their character.
Right.
As a problem.
Right.
And it's not a problem. It's
right.
I think this can be applied in so many different ways,
Sure.
in many different ways and aspects of life. Like dealing with this boat that I'm, been working on. It's been a decade maybe. Mm-hmm. In those 10 or 12 years I've been working on that boat, I have tried to pawn off and pay my way out of certain problems. Mm-hmm. Like I took the boat to a boat mechanic to have the motor put in and things. It took him 5 years. Now, granted,
why?
He had a heart attack and he got crushed, then he lost part of he moved his business locations and such like that. But, regardless of it, as I'm working on it now, and I have a different attitude toward it, that no one is there to save me. I have a problem and I need to fix it, and I need to just do what I need to do to get over this challenge. Right. Because until I get over this challenge, I'm stuck. And I don't like being stuck.
Right.
I hate that worse than bored.
Yeah.
But once I had that, started getting in that attitude, it's amazing how it just snowballs, and you apply it in different ways. I apply it at work.
Sure.
I apply it in my personal life. It changes your whole world view. So, now you do absolutely have to own your life.
Right.
And make these tough decisions. It's not easy. It's certainly, not, there can be a lot of pain and suffering involved with it, especially when you're in denial that you think things are going to change.
Right.
But you still keep coming back to the same thing. Like even with the boat, I'm doing that too.
Absolutely.
I took it to the mechanic, try to pawn it off, but he didn't do what I really wanted him to do. So now I'm faced with having to do it. It came right back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I didn't learn what I needed to learn from that first time. So until a person sees that and can recognize that for what it is, they are going to be stuck.
Absolutely. I didn't coin the phrases, but I like to use them a lot. One is you can either be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution. And I also remind my clients that there's some people that have a solution for every problem, and there's some people that have a problem for every solution.
Gosh, that's so true.
And from my experience with a very, very a bad marriage at a young age. I mean, I met my ex-husband when I was in my 20s, and he was 11 years older than me. And by that point, the most important thing I wanted in my life was stability. I had been done with the wild child side of me. I went back to school, and I got my GED, and they said, you scored off the charts. Do you want to get your associates? Because we'll pay for you to go to Broward College. And so I went and got my associate's degree. And in the whole time, one of the things that a lot of people, young people, have to learn, and the sooner they learn it, the better, is it does not matter how much you love somebody. You cannot change that person by loving them. They have to want to change. And that is not a reflection on you, me. That wasn't a reflection on me. It was the idea of thinking that if you love somebody enough and you show them that you're going to be there for them, that they would want to change.
Right.
And unfortunately for me, that didn't happen. It didn't happen in my first marriage, and it didn't happen in the relationship with my son's father, which was actually a very physically abusive relationship. And my first relationship with my ex-husband lasted 7 years. We were only married a year and a half. We were together for 6 years, and it was on and off and on and off. And my relationship with my son's father lasted 2.5 years because I got wise and said, okay, I'm not spending another 7 years doing this. Mm-hmm. But as I've grown, again, when you start to learn about yourself and you learn about what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept. You learn key points in a relationship. What are you willing to compromise? Where are you willing to draw the line? You do tend to start figuring things out for yourself. And I guess that's why I do kind of have a very tough love attitude with my coaching clients when it comes to a lot of it is relationship based, and it'll come down to, well, what is it that you want to get out of this? Because if you're coming to me with these issues and you're looking to me to tell you how to get this person to change, I can't do that because you can't make somebody change. It comes down to, what are you willing to live with? I had a client where the guy she was seeing had cheated on her, and not only cheated, but he was lying about it for a long time. And knowing that for me would be an absolute deal breaker. But I, again, as a coach, and being completely non-judgmental, it's not up for me to tell somebody what they're willing to tolerate, not tolerate, because we're all different about that. You know, we all have our thresholds of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And so my best advice was, look, if you're willing to stay in this situation, you're basically giving this person a pass. You know, you're giving them the green light to say, I've done this. It was acceptable, wasn't acceptable, but it was forgiven. Mm-hmm. And so why would you think that that's going to change? You know, why would you think that anything that, you know, if anything, it gets worse, because the longer you know somebody, the more their bad habits come out, and, you know, people meet each other and they're on their best behavior, and you don't find out a lot of these things until
very true. Can take years.
Into it. Yeah. 6 months, years. I mean, and so I always like to kind of have my clients kind of compartmentalize for themselves, like, what do you want? What's the most important thing to you in a relationship? And what falls way down here, you know, that you can tolerate or live with? It's not a big problem. You know, he hogs the covers. Okay, I can live with that. He's cheated on me. I can't live with that. So it's important for people to know on an individual basis what they will tolerate and not tolerate. And it's not because it's right or it's wrong. It's because that's what affects them. That's what either triggers them or, you know,
Yeah. What's right for one person could be wrong for another and vice versa.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean,
Absolutely.
sometimes it is a little bit more cut and dry. There's good and bad.
Hmm.
Um, I try to just treat people the way I want to be treated.
Exactly. And I think, for me, as I learn more about people, just meeting with different clients, one of my biggest epiphanies, and that was actually what prompted me to write the book, was when I met my current husband, Scott. And I had already been a single mom for 11 years, and I had worked, when my son was an infant, I worked 3 jobs at night. I bartended, I worked promotions, I did all these different things because, once again, the most important thing to me is independence. And I wanted my own place. We had been living in apartments, but every 3 years, the rent was raised and raised. And I had finally had a company that came to me when my son was about 2. And it was a liquor importing company. And I had been working promotions for them. And my former supervisor recommended me for her job because she was leaving. And it was amazing because I started this job and I worked from home. I met my deadlines on my time. I was there to walk my son to school and to pick him up. And I made enough that I could send him to summer camp. My son never went without. I always made sure that he got to do a lot of the same things all of his friends got to do. And that was important to me. And also having a home. So when he was about 6, I was finally able to buy a townhouse. And I got us a 3-bedroom, 3-bath townhouse in 2009. And he was 8 at that time. And that was a huge accomplishment for me because that was like, I have my place. And I think that from my past and running around and living with other people and having issues where I never felt settled, that was huge for being a big part of growing up for me, was buying my house and having my own place and knowing that I was now like planted somewhere. And it's funny because a lot of people, when they talk about things like what were their, the prophetic moment in their lives and things like that. And a lot of people will tell you that point is when they've hit rock bottom. I turned to God when I was so strung out and so addicted, or I was so this or so that. Yeah. And for me, it was funny because I was single at the time, and happily, because at that point I had kind of had enough with all of the dysfunctional relationships I had been in, and I was busy with work, and I was busy with my son, and what I loved so much about my job was it was a new environment every day. I'm not wired to be a 9-to-5er in a cubicle at work. That to me is like worse than death. So I was always going to new places and interviewing new girls, and my company I had to travel a lot within Florida and during the year because we held corporate meetings up in New York and things like that, and lots and lots of interesting people. I was still in the same element with a lot of athletes and celebrities and musicians because it was a liquor industry. So we were always doing, one of our products at the time was Grey Goose, which was huge back then. So we were always getting invited to sponsor all of these great events. And so I was living the best life that I think I could possibly live. And I was like, wow, except for like the perfect guy, which I don't even need, I've done it. I feel like an adult now. I feel like I've found what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm happy. The first job that I've been at, and I've been there for 9 years, and I love it. And it started to nag at me, and it was almost like a little. It started off kind of as like a scratchy sort of feeling, like something was just rubbing me wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And so I started kind of focusing on like, okay, is this the mental illness? Is this the feeling of battling something that isn't really there? And it started kind of messing with my head a little bit because I couldn't figure out why. On paper I had everything and I was happy, but I still felt something missing. And that was when I decided, well, the only thing that I don't have and haven't had for a long time is any sort of a spiritual connection. And so being raised down here, I was raised in a very conservative Jewish household. I mean, we did temple on the high holidays, and I had my bat mitzvah, and that was it. So I really didn't have anything to go by other than temple. And so, okay, well, we'll start there. And I went back, and I stuck it out for a couple years. It was the same temple that I had actually, the rabbi that had actually bat mitzvahed me was still there. But let's just say it was absolutely not what I expected. It was the antithesis of what I had expected. And on one of the highest holidays, I was there in a room with thousands of people who only come once a year, and no one acknowledged me. No one said hello to me. No one greeted me. My mom wasn't with me because she had just had some emergency surgery. I had somebody watching my son, and I decided to go by myself. And I left there in tears, and I thought, this is so wrong, because I've never felt more isolated, and I don't think that's what God wants for my life. I don't think God wants me feeling this unhappiness, this sadness when I leave here. But I didn't know what to do about it, because I don't have a lot of experience. I mean, the only experience I had growing up was with my friends who were Catholic and went to Nativity. And, I was like, well, that's not really going to work for me. So I was seeing a therapist with my son at the time, because as a single mom and my son had ADHD, we were working through a lot of that stuff to help him out. And I was telling her about my situation, and she had made this suggestion to me about trying something called Unitarian Universalism, which is a very big mouthful. And what it ended up being, I ended up finding a local UU church, and it was really a very good experience. It was a stepping stone for me towards understanding I was on the right path. It wasn't where I was planning to settle, but it gave me a lot of freedom to experience other cultures, other religions, because the thing about Unitarian Universalism is it incorporates and encompasses everybody. It's more like a web of life sort of mentality, where it doesn't matter what your background is. We're all here. We're all human. Very kind of a lot of 70s hippie feel to it. My husband and I actually ended up getting married at the UU church, which was wonderful. And it was a really great place for me to start. But when I met my husband, the really interesting thing is he told me right off the bat that he was a born-again Christian. And I rolled my eyes and said, oh, great. You're one of those. Because my experience in the past was not a good one. I've had, as being raised Jewish, I've had people shoving the Bible down my throat from as far back as I can remember, and I always like to say a little knowledge is dangerous, because people will pull Bible quotes out and use them against you. And then it's kind of like, in the same breath, they're going, but, you're Jewish, so you're chosen. And it's like, okay, you're totally confusing me right now. So one of the things that impressed me the most about my husband was the fact that he actually knew more about Judaism than I did, which I found fascinating, because I'd yet to meet anybody who told me they were a Christian, but knew as much about the Old Testament as he did. And he helped me through a lot of the same questions anybody, whether you're an atheist or agnostic, or, you're not a practicing Christian, would ask. And he did it all in a manner that I could understand. He didn't try to preach at me. He didn't try to talk over my head. He didn't try to insult me with, things that he knew I wasn't going to understand. And he led me through it kind of step by step by step. And so we started going to a non-denominational Christian church that I actually worked at for 5 years. And it was there that I ended up, accepting Jesus and getting baptized. And, but I did have that one moment. And I think it actually happened because at the same time, we were also going to a Messianic temple, where the Messianic temple is the rabbi, and they still do all the stuff out of the Torah, but they acknowledge Yeshua, Jesus, as Lord and Savior. So they accept the whole Bible as, what you're supposed to do. And so seeing that and understanding how it actually fit together so perfectly, really, I remember that moment where I just started bawling. I was just sitting there hysterical. And it happened one other time at another church that we went to where something just happened and I just felt this overwhelming sense of, and it wasn't sadness, but it was just this
joy, maybe.
It was just this overwhelming sense of understanding how much I was loved. How much I was loved and how much whatever I did didn't matter. I didn't have to feel guilty. I didn't have to keep questioning what I was doing and why I was doing it. And that was probably the biggest turning point in my entire adult life. And, being somebody who was always feeling like people were shoving that in my face or trying to, condemn me with it, I'm always walking a very fine line of talking to people about that without sounding like I'm either being preachy or telling them, what they need to do or not to do. For me, it didn't happen until I was in my 40s. But when it did, I couldn't tell people enough how life-changing it was. Simply because, not from a religious perspective whatsoever, but I believe that for me, it's given me a sense of peace. I don't feel like I have to judge anybody because that's not for me to do. And being that I am such an empath and my heart is so out there for people, animals, anything that's hurting. I feel it physically myself. Helping people and showing people that they're loved and reminding people that there's always hope, there's always light, there's always something that you can turn to, and, understanding that the Bible doesn't say anything about, accept God and everything is wonderful. No. The Bible is very specific when Jesus said, you will have trials and tribulations, and I take heart in knowing that, because I think a lot of people are under the impression that believers just walk around on clouds and we're always happy and nothing ever bothers us. And that's so not true, but knowing that there is a God that loves me, knowing that there's somebody that wants my best for me. And frankly, the fact that I'm still here at 56 amazes me, because for a long time, I didn't think I was going to see, past 25. So, I think that we're all here for a reason, and we just need to kind of figure out what that is. And for me, it's definitely helping people that have been through a lot of the same things I have. And I have a very, very soft spot in my heart for single moms, women that have been through abusive relationships and are kind of having to pick up and start all over again with a job, a new place to live, and it's hard. And there's a lot of women out there doing it. There's a lot of women who realize that I don't have a choice, because I can't just crawl up in a ball and die. I've got to do this. I've got to pick myself up, and I've got to get through this situation. And I've been here before. That's always a good one for me, is kind of remembering back to things that I thought I'd never get out of. And not only did I get out of them, but I got out of them better than I went in with them. And I think that's something as we get older that we definitely gain. I think wisdom comes with age, obviously, but so does insight, and understanding like, okay, you know what? This is not the first time I've been in this situation. It's probably not going to be the last time. I've gotten through it, and I'm going to get through it again. I may need a little help this time, but it's that positivity that is really where I feel my clients need a little bit of help a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. That's awesome. I think this is a great place to wrap up, honestly. That's such a, so encouraging.
Thank you.
Really encouraging. You've lived quite a life, and, it takes a lot of guts, honestly, to come out and to admit to some things about your life. I know that from this show, things I've had to deal with. But I admire that so much, and I love that you live life on your own terms, and you just, you own it and you make it happen the way you need it to be. I think people can really benefit from listening to this podcast, and they're going to love your book. So, check it out. If you're listening, check out Mindy Kaufman-Opiela. Aha! I was practicing that in my head during some of this, but it's been such a honor to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
For joining, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do, and I
did.
Hope the audience loves it.
I do too.
So this is John Curran for A Swift Kick in the Ass. Peace.
Peace.
This marks the end of another episode of A Swift Kick in the Ass, placing it directly in the can. As much as I like to talk, even I have my limits. It's time to go. Catch me on the next show. For better or worse, whether you like us or not, please leave comments wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Visit our home on the interweb. I think you can leave me a voicemail there. You can also email me at john@aswiftkickintheass.com. It's been my extreme pleasure. I hope you got a lot out of it. I hope you got your ass moving. Until then, until the next time, I'm out of here. Peace.